So, Battlefield 5's Battle Royale mode Firestorm has been out for about a week now, and with the mode coming several months after the initial release of the game, there can be no excuse for a poor quality product. So I've been playing this a lot recently, and today I want to look at whether or not Firestorm was in fact worth that long wait, and is there any chance that this mode can actually shift some copies of Battlefield 5, given that EA themselves have said the game didn't meet expectations, at least in terms of sales. Well, let's have a look. So then, when I first jumped into the game, I have to admit I was pretty worried that what we'd be getting here would be just a shoehorned in Battle Royale mode that's purely chasing a trend. I mean, the co-op mode that was added to the game a couple of months ago didn't exactly inspire confidence. But fortunately, what we've ended up with here is a lot more thought out and fleshed out than I'd first feared. The core gameplay feels solid, and there's a really nice pacing to the action, meaning you never feel like the next firefight is too far away. The audio is spot on as well, allowing you to pinpoint enemies closing in on you, and the movement system with its vaulting and being able to smash through windows feels tight and translates nicely to Battle Royale. And of course, a lot more is carried over from the standard multiplayer that was in the game at launch. So things like the gunplay feel pretty much exactly the same as the base Battlefield 5 game. But where aspects and mechanics of the gameplay needed to be changed, they have been, and they've largely been implemented quite well. That having been said, I do have quite a few problems with some of the systems in the game and potential improvements that need to be made. So let's get into it, and since we briefly touched on the guns a second ago, let's talk about those guns and the loot in Firestorm. Now, as I said, gunplay is unchanged and largely feels pretty damn good to me. The guns handle as they should, and skill is rewarded for controlling recoil, judging bullet drop at extreme ranges, and landing those headshots. It's by no means the most difficult system to learn, but there's enough depth to keep things interesting. The process of getting those guns though, and the attachments on them, is far less satisfying. Firstly, just picking up anything off the ground can be extremely frustrating, as rather than have a box system for loot or even a proximity looting option, Firestorm opts for a system whereby each individual item spills out onto the ground. Now, initially it's not too bad when it's just the pre-placed loot. There's not too much of it and it's decently spaced out. But once you kill an enemy and go to loot their body, it's a whole different story. Loot piles up and makes it almost impossible to pick out the individual items that you actually want. I mean, just look at this pile of crap in front of me here. Imagine only wanting one single item from that pile. Oh, and if you kill an enemy on a hill, yeah, the loot will slide down it, which is just incredibly annoying and pretty damn dumb. All of this makes looting take far longer than you should really need, and of course, while you're looting, you're vulnerable. And there have been several occasions playing the game where I've decided to leave loot behind that I might want because it's just too difficult and too time consuming to get. Especially if the storm is coming in or there are enemies nearby. Now, the official Battlefield Twitter has posted a video of an updated system, supposedly showing improvements, but honestly, as far as I can see, it still looks pretty chaotic. The real solution here is going to come when they decide to take all that crap and cram it into a bag that allows players to quickly and easily grab exactly what they want. So, not the ideal looting system then, to say the least. But what exactly are you picking up when you're getting that loot? Well, unlike games like PUBG and Call of Duty Blackout, there is no real attachment system here. Instead, the loot is greatly simplified. When you go to pick up a gun, you'll see a rarity of either common, rare, or epic, and that is all that determines what attachments your gun has. There's no hunting around for scopes or grips or suppressors, it's all already on the gun. For some people, that simplification is going to make the gameplay experience more streamlined and just easier to get into. But for me, it takes away from some of the tactics and personal preference of the game. Sure, the game may say a gun is rare and therefore better than a common because it has an aperture sight on it, but often I'd rather just stick to the iron sights, as sights and scopes are mainly just personal preference. Now, you could say, well, just keep the lower rarity gun then and use the iron sights, and that would be fine, but seemingly higher rarity level guns also have perks operating in the background, such as reduced recoil or better hipfire, leaving you in a situation where you have to choose between your preferred optic or an objectively better gun. And honestly, I'd rather have seen a more complicated system that, yes, may take a little bit of learning, but in the end lets the player have the choice of how they set up their weapon and adds variety to what you can do with the guns. Aside from guns, you'll also find health packs, armor, and an abundance of anti-vehicle weaponry, because yes, this is still a Battlefield game, and yes, it has vehicles. Now, when it was first announced that Firestorm would have vehicles in it, I've got to admit I was pretty skeptical. I thought they'd give one player or one squad too much power and they'd just be able to dominate. But I'm pleased to say that's not the case at all. In fact, it's a little bit the other way if anything, and vehicles often feel like a bit of a disadvantage. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of anti-vehicle gadgets dotted around the map in loot, so you're always quite likely to have some way of fighting back against an enemy tank. And the fuel system and a lack of a massive amount of ammo for tanks makes it pretty difficult for players to just stay in them for the entire round. Besides which, and not to state the obvious here, but tanks are big, cumbersome things and make a hell of a lot of noise, which is fine in the multiplayer because you have a team around you to protect you, but in a Battle Royale game, they just end up making you a huge target, letting everyone within a fairly wide range know exactly where you are. Now, personally, I feel it's better that they're too weak rather than too powerful, but it does seem playing the game now like vehicles don't really have a role in it other than as transport to outrun the storm. And if you stay in them too long, a Panzerfaust is likely coming your way. And as for those Panzerfausts and other anti-vehicle weapons, well, they have another use. One of the first things that made me take notice of the Battlefield franchise was its destruction. I can remember watching YouTube videos back around Battlefield 4 of players just knocking out a wall, totally surprising their opponent and getting the kill. And thankfully, that destruction is here in Firestorm. If you see an enemy camping up in a house or far in the distance, or even just want to open up a new path for yourself, then a quick Panzerfaust can be the best course of action. And if you get it right, it can make for some extremely satisfying kills. And they've really gone all out with the destruction here too, as the giant firestorm that acts as a circle in this mode also totally destroys buildings in its path as it rolls in. And standing and watching this huge wall of fire flatten everything before it is just awesome to watch. I only wish that there was a little more variety in the gadgets, which other than the epic artillery and legendary V1 rocket strikes, are generally just minor explosive items. This, I feel, is where the setting gets in the way. Now, this is still Battlefield 5, so we're still in World War II here, and for me, that's a real limiting factor. Personally, I'd prefer a more modern setting, which would allow for some really interesting gadgets and weapons. But here they're trying to maintain some sort of historical accuracy, which they don't really succeed at anyway. And especially not with World War II having a massive Battle Royale. So for me at least, I feel that a more modern setting would have been more enjoyable and allowed DICE and Criterion more room for creativity. But to be honest, I've been wanting a modern Battlefield game for a long time now, so I'm perhaps a little biased, and it's more of a personal preference nitpick than a major problem. One thing that is a major problem though is a lack of duos at launch, and even crazier is that it's being brought in next month as a timed event. Personally, duos would have been my preferred method of playing, and it can be kind of difficult to get 3 of your friends together all at once, all who want to play Battlefield. Jumping into a game of duos would be much easier for a lot of people, and the only reason I can think of for the decision to leave it out is that DICE feel it would split the player base too much. Because as far as I can see, it would have no negative impact on the gameplay of the mode. Besides which, timed events are supposed to be something different and creative for players to get excited for. I've always been a big fan of the brawls in games like Overwatch and Hearthstone that take the way you normally play the game and turn it on its head in some weird and wacky way. But even in games more similar to Battlefield, well, we had the Outbreak event in Rainbow Six Siege, which got everyone excited and really changed up the game by adding a brand new PvE element to a game that other than Terrorist Hunt was solely PvP. And in Firestorm, what do we get? Duos. It's not exactly mind-blowing. It's not breaching the limits of creativity. As far as I can tell, they could just flip a switch right now and have duos enabled permanently, and that is exactly what they should do. Moving on then, and I want to mention the map. Now, this Norwegian setting serves its purpose with large open spaces, lots of elevation changes, and a few hot loot areas where players naturally clash, including some really nice vehicle spawn spots that require the player to open up a vault to get the goodies inside, even if those tanks aren't necessarily powerhouses. Opening up these vaults though takes a long time, and a siren sounds letting everyone know your exact location, so it's a nice little risk-reward mechanic. And all of those good things about the map, on top of the fact that it is absolutely gorgeous, as you'd expect from a Battlefield game, and at least for me it's been running amazingly well, make it a really solid base for the Battle Royale gameplay. And just to add a bit more of a Battlefield feel to it all, I really like the system of having objectives pop up on the map that drop rare loot if you take the time to go and capture them. My one small complaint here is that the map is slightly lacking in character. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that they like the map, and don't get me wrong, I like it too, but there's nowhere on the map that I find particularly interesting or want to drop every time I play. And it's not something I can really put my finger on, but nowhere really grabbed me and felt like an awesome location. It's definitely more of a nitpick than anything else, as the map is more than acceptable, and I think the long-term solution, for me at least, would be to have more than one map available to play, as that would satisfy for me what I feel is a need for a little bit more variety. Finally then, before we get to the conclusion, I want to mention the experience outside of the gameplay itself. The progression system and actually getting into a game. Now, in terms of a Firestorm progression system, there's pretty much nothing here at the moment. You can still work towards some of your daily orders and assignments from the base Battlefield 5 game, and there are at least a few Firestorm specific assignments that have been added for this mode, but for me, Firestorm stands out as almost a separate game from Battlefield 5, and it just needs some items or skins that you can work towards while you're playing. Sure, the gameplay is the most important factor as to whether you keep playing the game, but having a little bit more of a reward, a Firestorm specific reward, would be nice. Now, I don't mean microtransactions, I very specifically don't mean microtransactions. Just some free things to progress towards. Something that makes you stand out while you're playing. As for getting into a match, well, this is a game where once you die, that's it for the round. No respawns, and no real reason to stick around till the end. So wouldn't it make sense to just add a button that lets you queue again immediately for another round? Instead, you have to quit out of the round you're in, get taken to an end of round summary screen, then click play again, and then click another button to finally get into a queue. In total, it probably only takes an extra 30 seconds or maybe a minute longer than it should to get back into a queue, but when you're playing potentially dozens of rounds in a session, it all adds up and it would be a nice little quality of life improvement that I feel should be made. So, finally then, is Firestorm worth the wait? Is this a good mode that really adds something to the Battlefield franchise? In my opinion, yes, definitely. And I've said in the past that I had my doubts about a Battlefield Battle Royale, but what DICE and Criterion have achieved here is an extremely fun game mode that retains its Battlefield roots. It manages to be new and different, but still feel like a Battlefield game, and having that Battlefield feeling, along with the game's looks and how well it runs, has honestly made it one of my favourite Battle Royale games right off the bat. I do, however, think it was a mistake not releasing it until months after the game launched. And with the unfinished state that Battlefield 5 was in at release, it was clear that the whole game needed more development time. But on the whole, I am very impressed with Firestorm, and if it can be refined and have more content added to it, it has the potential to become a great mode. And if you're looking for a Battle Royale game with good pacing, solid gunplay and amazing graphics, then this is definitely worth a look. Not at the full £60 that it's currently listed for on the PlayStation Store, or even the £28 it is on Origin. At least not if you're only interested in the Battle Royale. But if you can find it cheaper, it's a lot of fun. As for whether Firestorm actually will end up helping sell more copies of Battlefield 5 en masse, I really kinda doubt it. Sure, I think there'll be a little upturn of people who held off buying the game initially because they were only interested in Battle Royale, but there are so many good Battle Royale games out there that are available for a lot cheaper or even free, and convincing people to part with more money when they already have so many good options is going to be tough. Personally, if I were in charge of how this game was sold right now, I'd have it as its own standalone game. Of course, anyone who already bought Battlefield 5 should get it for free, but sell this for maybe £10 to everyone else, so that they don't have to buy the full game, don't have to go through that paywall if they only want to access Firestorm. Then you can treat it like a brand new game, a product all of its own, and give it the marketing and hype that it deserves. So what do you think? Do you like Firestorm? What's good about it? What needs improvement? And do you think that Firestorm can change the fortunes of Battlefield 5? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, I'd be very appreciative if you'd click that like button below, and subscribe for more like this if you haven't already. Anyway, I've been Nathan, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.